Hello everyone. Australia-India Business Council Limited is celebrating 35 years of promoting bilateral business and trade. We now have with us the National Chair of AIBC, Jodi McKay. Jodi is well known and respected for her work over 15 years as a Member of Parliament, where she served as a Cabinet Minister and the Opposition Leader as well. Jodi McKay is in Hyderabad as a Chief Guest for T-Hub Conclave. TV9 could actually get a few minutes of her time, so let's get started. A very warm welcome to you to TV9.
Thank you. I've had such an incredible welcome, so I feel very privileged to be here in Hyderabad.
Thanks for giving your time for TV9.
Thank you. I'm so pleased because everyone in Australia knows TV9 as well, so not just in India.
Yeah, to start off, actually I was so surprised to learn that you started off your career as a journalist.
I did. I started off my career as a journalist, and if you think about journalism and politics, there is that, you've got to ask questions and have an inquiring mind, and so I ended up doing kind of a 360 and going into politics.
Exactly. How did the switch happen?
It was that I felt politics in Australia is very different to India, so I felt very strongly about my local community and the things I wanted to achieve, and I believed that as a journalist I wasn't going to be able to do that the way I wanted to do it. So politics was the way of making life easier for people, of getting good policies through that are meaningful, and so I stood for election. I'm unusual in that I represented 2 seats. So I represented an area which is called Newcastle, and it has the largest coal export port in the world. A lot of that coal comes to India. And then I represented an area called Strathfield, and Strathfield has a significant Indian Australian community. So 2 really different areas, and then of course I went on to lead our party, and I retired recently, so.
That is really surprising and shocking. We were actually waiting to see you in a different level in the future.
Well, I was leading our party, and it was just time for me to retire and think about something else. And the India-Australia relationship is something I've always felt really passionate about. And there was obviously an opportunity to lead what is the biggest business chamber in the India-Australia relationship, the oldest, as you mentioned, but also the most prominent. And so it's been a really exciting time because the India-Australia relationship, there's never been more of a focus on it than right now because of the free trade agreement and the strategic partnership that India and Australia now has.
Of course, I can understand that, but isn't it too early to retire? I think you're too young to retire.
You never say never about going back, but in Australia, it can be difficult getting re-elected. I know I would have been re-elected, but it was just time. I'd had 15 years in politics. I was a cabinet minister. I was a shadow minister. I was leader of the opposition. I held 2 electorates, which is very unusual in Australia. So I got to the top of where I needed to be, and then it was, okay, well, what comes next? And because I'm so involved and immersed in our Indian-Australian community in Australia, this was just a natural progression. And as I said, this relationship has never been more important. So for me, being able to make a contribution at home, but also here in India, and the friendship that India and Australia has was just something I couldn't pass up. So, plus really I get to be here with you, which I'm very excited about. On my 3rd visit to Hyderabad.
Oh, exactly. I was about to ask that. What do you like about the place?
Look, I find Hyderabad, we obviously have a big Telugu community in Australia.
So part of Hyderabad is already there. Mini Hyderabad.
And people who are passionate about Telangana as well. And I think, what I love about Hyderabad and Telangana is just the rich history here in Hyderabad. It's also such an innovative city, and I love the fact that, for some reason, I'm a country girl, but I love the hills. I love the fact that it's just not a flat city, that there's sculpture to it. It's just a really go-ahead city of India, and I think, I'm, as National Chair of the Australia-India Business Council, my remit is right across Australia, but I have to say that Hyderabad is one of my favourite cities in India.
Hyderabad food is a must mention.
Oh yes, I've had the biryani. I've got to have whenever I come to Hyderabad, and I had a lovely biryani yesterday as well. So
do you have a sweet tooth, or is spicy okay for you?
No, see, in Australia we eat a lot of spicy food,
okay.
because Australia is a big multicultural nation. So we have food from right around the world. So, you know, Hyderabad has biryani. In Australia, you can be eating Greek or Italian or Vietnamese and Indian. I would be eating Indian 2 or 3 times a week. So it's a vast palate we have to have in Australia. So I come here and I'm right at home.
Oh, good to hear that again. Let's talk some business. You've been here for the Tea Hub.
Yeah, so we had an incredible visit to Tea Hub last night. I've heard such, you know, such a powerful praise for Tea Hub and We Hub as well, and nothing prepared me for just the incredible innovation that is so obviously on display there. So I think that that is one thing that you know, Hyderabad and Telangana have. Everyone does focus on Bangalore, but I think that Hyderabad has something quite special here, because it's not just about IT, it's about entrepreneurship, it's about startups, it's about supporting young people and making sure that, you know, there's the very best education, but it's flowing on to, well, what do you want to do next? And for me, Tea Hub really exemplifies that. So I just see such amazing opportunities. They've got a partnership with 2 Australian universities, but one of the commitments I made last night is that we actually need to look at how we can increase those partnerships, and that's right across Australia. So most of the 2 partnerships they have are in Victoria, but I think, you know, we need to see a national footprint across Australia. So I think Tea Hub is something that Hyderabad should be very, very proud of.
It's definitely a unique facility. I think you must have gone around Tea Hub and...
I did. I went around with some of those startup founders who were there, and they explained to me how the facility is used, and they explained to me what the plans are for the future. And there's the Tea Work, the work facility that's just been... I mean, we have a startup hub, for instance, in Sydney, which is where I live, but we don't have this on this magnitude. And we don't have a facility either that's entirely dedicated to women. I mean, I was at We Hub today. So We Hub obviously is startups, but it's entrepreneurship. You know, it's about also supporting women leaders and giving them, you know, the encouragement and the skills and the mentorship that allows them to do great things. So I just think, you know, Hyderabad has so much to offer, and under the free trade agreement, there are huge opportunities for these strategic partnerships with Australia, and that's what I'm here to explore and to make sure that we're capitalising on.
So it looks like many new ideas were discussed and discovered.
Yeah, you know, so last night I'm here with my colleague Irfan Malik, who is our Associate National Chair, and he's a real passionate supporter of startups. So, you know, I said to the crowd, it was a packed room, and I said, if you want to talk about Australia and startups, if you see opportunities, go and talk to Irfan. Well, Irfan was there for the next 2 hours talking about opportunities with Australia. So it was just fabulous. It was great to have, and you know what was also wonderful is that many of them were young people. And we have, you know, we have a growing diaspora in Australia, so a Telugu community that is deeply passionate about their hometown. But I think what was wonderful is seeing young people who think, okay, there is now a strategic partnership between India and Australia, so how do we capitalise on that? What does our future look like in this new environment? So inspiring, amazing.
Jodi, you were the first woman to enter the Australian Parliament in a sari.
Yes. How
Why
fabulous.
are you so fond of, so passionate about the Indian attire? Even now I can see you in an Indian dress.
Yeah, look, a sari is very special. So I was introduced to saris about 8-9 years ago. So over that time, I've collected a lot of saris. So I have probably more than 115 saris. In fact, I will go back home with another 10 saris.
Oh my God, even I do not have so much collection.
I've also got a wonderful collection of Pochampally saris as well. So one of the things, so why do I love saris? I love saris because they are a conversation. So not only do they make me feel like a strong, confident woman, they are a conversation. So in Australia, if I wear a sari, I have aunties coming up to me who want to fix my palu and, you know, who want to discuss the sari and the weave that I have on. And I also can tell you where I get every sari. So there's an emotion attached to a sari. So, you know, I know what it's like to open it and then go, oh my gosh, quick, show me the palu. What does that look like? And then it's just a beautiful conversation, a way of breaking down barriers. Because approaching an MP sometimes can be a little, you know, a little difficult. You know, you can be a little nervous about coming and having a conversation with an MP. I don't want that. I want my Indian Australian community that I proudly represent to be able to come up and talk to me, and the sari is a way of doing that. So I've also then, apart from, you know, being able to drape it, and I've tried to educate myself on different weaves as well. So I don't know everything about saris, but if I ask if there's a question, I have this range of amazing women who are there to support me, and it's just been a lovely experience. So my husband keeps telling me that I have to stop buying, because I even bought a new bed and it's got drawers under it, and unfortunately that is now filled with saris. So our whole room is, and I don't know how I'm going to get them back with the luggage weight, so I'm also worried about. But saris are amazing, and as I said, I love Pochampally saris. I was given another one yesterday. I have a beautiful Pochampally sari that is one of my favourites. So
looks like you know much more about saris than I do.
No, I think, you know, and what's really interesting is in Australia, if you go to an event, you have women who are wearing saris. So if I go to an Indian event in Australia, whether it's a festival or a celebration or just, you know, any gathering, every woman has a sari on. Here, women don't wear saris as much, and I think in some ways that's disappointing, because I think, you know, saris are just such an incredible symbol of India. You know, the textile industry here is so, you know, it's built on an incredible heritage, and so when I have a sari, when I receive a sari, when I buy a sari, and whether it's here or it's in Australia, I just treasure it. And yes, so I was the first woman to wear a sari into a parliament, and I put the video on.
How was the response?
Amazing, just amazing. Everyone shared it, and it went, you know, came to India, and everyone shared it. And there are a number of women now who have done, you know, did what I have done, what I did, and you know, because we are multicultural, it's okay to do it. But you know, don't get me started about saris. I drive past a sari shop, it's like, oh, I really want to go into that. So yeah, it's difficult.
That's the reason why the Indians own you.
It's one of the reasons, I think. I think in the beginning it was, you know, it's got to a point, I think, where people say, you know, we want you to come to our event, but it's really, instead of dear Jodi, please come to our event, it's dear Sari, come to our event and bring Jodi with you. So the sari has been one way, but I think, you know, Indian Australian community understand that my passion is real and genuine, and I love India, and I believe in the potential of the relationship, which I think is really important. And I'm the first non-Indian chair of the Australia-India Business Council. As you mentioned, we're some 35, 36 years old. We were actually formed by two Prime Ministers, the Prime Minister then of Australia, Bob Hawke, and here, Rajiv Gandhi. So we have an amazing history. And of course, Australia was the first country to acknowledge India's independence 75 years ago. And then you get to last year, where we signed the Free Trade Agreement, the first developed country to sign a free trade agreement ever with India. And, you know, the relationship, we went from being good friends, built on, you know, our establishment by prime ministers, Indian independence, to now being in this situation where it's just remarkable.
Exactly. What's your role in strengthening the Indian community in Australia?
Well, my role is really about acknowledging the power of the diaspora. So we have seen, I think, an acknowledgement over a long time here in India that the diaspora, wherever they're based globally, has this incredible ability to be an advocate or a champion for what India is about. In Australia, it's probably only happened recently that we've realised that our diaspora is in fact a living bridge between Australia and India. And so my involvement has always been, and my passion has always been, about what is the role of Indian Australians in Australia in our relationship with India, because every state is different. So if you look at our Telugu community, for instance, they know Telangana, they know what Telangana wants, they speak the language, they know the food, they know the dress, they know, they've got people and contacts here. So the strongest thing I think we have in our relationship with India is the fact that we're multicultural. I mean, you look at our population in Australia is only 25 million people, right? So it's relatively small compared to 1.4 billion here in India. But almost 1 million of that are Indian Australians. And that is growing because of the number of students who are studying there and then want to stay. And, it's such a beautiful place to live, Australia. But they always, everyone, whether it's first, second, third generation, they always have that connection back to India.
Right. How do you think the ECT is important?
Well, so the ECTA, which is Economic Cooperation Trade Agreement, is what is known as colloquially the Free Trade Agreement. And that agreement was negotiated early last year, and it came into force on the 29th of December. So we're only, a week, 2 weeks into this agreement. And why it's important is that Australia and other countries have been trying to negotiate free trade agreements with India for a very long time. Australia has been in this space for the last 10 years. This year, India said yes to Australia. So we're the first country. So we have what's called first mover advantage, if you like. So other countries like the UK, Canada, they're now rushing to negotiate a free trade agreement with India, but Australia is there first. And I think that is testimony to that history of the relationship that I spoke about. But more importantly, it's these amazing Indian Australians who very much want this to happen. And we had bipartisan support as well in Australia. So in the middle of all this, we went to a federal election and we had a change of government. But we have seen our previous government, our current government, all completely, involved in this and wanting this to work. And so within the first week of our new Prime Minister being elected, he met with Prime Minister Modi, and that was at the Quad. That's within the first week. That said, Australia believes India is important. Our Prime Minister will be here in March. Prime Minister Modi will be in Australia in September, October for the Quad meeting. And of course, we've got the final stage of the Free Trade Agreement, which is called the SECA, so another acronym, but that should be finalised mid-year. So you've got this strategic partnership, which is a regulatory framework that both governments have auspiced, but you have to have business that believes in that. And so our role here in Telangana and as I travel around India is saying the framework is there, now let's realise the opportunities.
Exactly. It's nice that this has come up from Australia, you taking the first step in this free trade agreement. How does this benefit both the nations mutually?
Yeah, okay, so Australia traditionally has a tariff duty of about 4 to 5% on most goods coming into the country. And so we are wiping that completely. So straight away, from the 29th of December, there will be no tariff on about 98% of goods coming into Australia. And from India, we're talking about food stuff, we're talking about jewellery, we're talking about textiles. So the tariff is gone. On the India side, they've wiped the tariff on about 70%. So there's still 30% that they're keeping a tariff on, and that's on areas like agricultural products, because that's always been a contested area between Australia and India. So there's still some way for us to go, I think, on the India side, but there's a respect from both sides that there are areas where you're not going to want to negotiate. But if you look at Australia, most of Australia's exports have been into India have been around resources, so coal and aluminium and resource-centric. The opportunity for Australia is to change that. For instance, just to give you one idea, we have lobsters, our world-famous lobsters, which are loved here in India, that no longer have a duty on them. So Western Australia, for instance, is now actively pursuing that. Our lamb and our wool, for instance, no tariff straight away. So our lamb providers are now actively pursuing that. And of course, on the India side, as I mentioned, there's so much opportunity there. So as a business council, we have hosted a number of delegations. The most recent was around the textile. So there's a great opportunity to work with our retailers and to actually look at, well, because a lot of the product that we were using was from China. And of course now with the duty waived and just this framework that says Australia and India need to be working together, you have this this desire by Australia to want to get product now from India, to want to embrace that even more so. So our trade currently with India is about $24 billion. It's hoped that that will increase to $45 billion within 5 years. But we had Piyush Goyal, of course, the trade minister there, and I was with him in April. And he set this incredibly ambitious target of trade, bilateral trade, being about $100 billion by 2030. So I've got a lot of work to do in getting out and talking to people about it. But it's really exciting, really exciting.
But what role did the Indians play there in this agreement being a success?
Yeah, huge. Because I think, so how this all came about in terms of acknowledging our diaspora as this living bridge, we had a report that was done by the former High Commissioner here, Peter Varghese, and this report highlighted, in Australia, it highlighted the importance of the economic imperative, the political and the people. And the people is something we haven't done well with. So we now have, for instance, money that our government is putting up for a Centre for Australia-India Relations that will be established within the next year, and it's all about connection with our diaspora. It's all about saying you are important in this relationship. And Australia has to stop looking at India as just India. India is made up of, you know, more than 28 states that are vibrant and different and have incredibly different trade priorities. So, you know, I heard KTR say recently that, you know, Andhra and Telangana, they're close, but they don't have the same, you know, Andhra is coastal, Telangana is not. So things are very, very different. So I think that our diaspora, our wonderful Indian Australian community believes in this, wants this, and now our government recognises the importance of them.
Okay, if I'll have to quote my Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, he said, our NRIs are our brand ambassadors in various countries.
So
How
true,
do you
so true. And of course, in Indore at the moment, there's the non-resident Indian gathering. So I know that we've got many Australians there as well. But I think that's right. It's not just a brand ambassador, though. I think it's even more so. I mean, I use that term living bridge, but it's about leveraging their knowledge and their opportunity that they see here. And it is, I think as well, it is much easier for an Indian company to do business in Australia because of our diaspora, and our system is more transparent. And you've got governments that are really set up for investment. Here, it's a little bit daunting, I think, for some Australian companies. So what we say to them as a business chamber is think about having a trusted partner here. So who are you going to partner with? Who do you trust? Who's going to help you through the regulatory system? Who's going to help you meet the customers and help you with the logistics chain? Who is going to do that? And our diaspora is well placed to be able to identify those people. So as I said, our diaspora in Australia is the fastest growing diaspora. They're just, and there's, for me as an MP, just an absolute pleasure and a privilege representing, you know, because I, as an MP, apart from wearing a sari, I'm regularly in a temple or a mosque. I'm you know, I celebrate here. Of course.
So you're half Indian.
Well, that is certainly what people say, but I can tell you I'm not. But my heart is all Indian.
Okay.
You know?
All Indian.
Yeah. Wow. Look, you know, for me, it's India is very special. It's an amazing place, and I'm very fortunate as a Member of Parliament, as a leader, to have been so deeply immersed in our Indian Australian community, and that is now translated at a really important time into how do we use that to actually benefit Australia and India. So it's an exciting time, and I'm really, really pleased to be a part of it and taking a leadership role.
Jodi, earlier the Indian student community used to look at US and other European countries with respect to business education and stuff. But over the years, times have changed, and now they're looking at Australia. Why do you think Australia has become the favorite destination for the student
Well, I
community?
think our diaspora play a huge part in that, right? So I think if we've got someone here from Hyderabad that wants to study, well, immediately they connect in with people they know in our Telugu community. That's the way it works. But what we saw, I think, during COVID was a drop-off in students overall coming to Australia. And we were concerned that our Indian students wouldn't come back. But I think what we saw is, that they did come back, because Australia is a beautiful place. It's an easy place. I mean, our traffic is bad. We complain about it, but it's nothing like Hyderabad traffic. But it's a welcoming place. Our universities are, globally well regarded. You can get a very good education there that is transportable internationally. And it just provides opportunity. And I think what we love about our international students in particular is they want to stay. So they stay and they become lifelong residents and champions. You mentioned it being about business education. For us, it's also tourism education, because their families come and stay, their friends come and stay. And so we have this just wonderful kind of, I'll call it an ecosystem that works just amazingly well.
I have my cousins staying in Australia as well.
See, there we go. See, you didn't even have to ask me the question. You could have answered.
This is for the camera. Anyway, India is very fastly gearing up with startups, So, do Indian startups stand any chance in Australia? What kind of support can be expected from the Australian government?
Yeah, look, startups are, in New South Wales, which is where I live, obviously. So we have a presence as AIBC, our chamber, across 6 states. But there is a focus on startups. But I think if you look at Australia and India, what you have is India has scale. So India has the scale that even startups in Australia want. But in Australia, it's a really good market to test things. It's a good market to say, well, is this actually going to work? And does it have legs? Is it going to get support? Can I make it work? And when I make it work, let's take it to India, because India has the scale that, 1.4 billion people compared to 25 million. But yes, there's a great deal of support. And as I said, one of the conversations we had last night was, well, how do we actually bring in increase our university partnerships? So last night, I made a quick call to a couple of universities, and I said, right, we need to get you involved in T-Hub. We need to look at how we get those innovation bridges going. And so I think, it's a really important time for startups, and Australia is open to it. And our role, I think, as AIBC is to make sure that we're championing it and saying back in Australia, you should see what Hyderabad is doing with T-Hub. It's amazing. Let's get Australian students there. Let's get young people into Australia so that we're sharing that information. So it's a really exciting time, and I think Hyderabad is leading on this, and I hope and I know that we'll be doing our bit to make sure people in Australia understand that.
If you can add on a bit on this, what are the top priority sectors when it comes to trade for the emerging business aspirants in India?
Yeah, so if you look at from the Australia side, as I said, it's primarily been about resources. So Australia needs to move beyond that. So I think that for Australia, we've got, I mentioned our lamb, we've got agricultural products, we've got a big organic market, which certainly is playing out here in India. We've got services. So this just doesn't include a tariff reduction. The agreement itself actually looks at services. So for instance, if you're a doctor and you want to move to Australia and you want to actually practice, and keep in mind we don't have enough doctors in Australia, particularly in our rural and regional areas, you have to then go through a whole process of re-qualifying. You shouldn't have to do that. So what the governments have recognised is that there should be mutual recognition. So that's just not in qualifications, it's in registration, it's in licensing. So that's one of the things that this free trade agreement is going to be able to deal with. There's also a number of sectors, so like business services, IT, there's urban planning, architecture, a whole range of, I think there's 30 subsectors. And what the agreement says is that they will get preferential treatment. So governments will make sure that those sectors which are important to India, which are important to Australia, will get preferential treatment. And I think that one of the things that Australia needs to do better, and there is a recognition by our government, but if we are to get more, because labour is a problem for us. We have always depended on immigration to actually be able to provide what we need to do for our citizens. But we need to work out our visa system. Our immigration system we've got a massive backlog in our visa, both in terms of students working, personal visas, parental relationship visas. So we need to do better there. But the opportunity is just extraordinary. India has its strengths, Australia has its strengths, but connecting us are our people.
So as the National Chair of AIBC, what are you aiming at to achieve this year?
So last year was big, right? So we had the negotiations over the free trade agreement. We had 8 ministers, senior ministers visit, and compared to the previous year where we had only 3. So that gives you an idea about what's happening, the way India is looking at Australia. And then on the 29th of December, we had the free trade agreement come into force. This year, in terms of what we want to achieve, this is about making it happen. This is about making sure that people are aware, and it's one of the reasons I'm in India, to make sure people understand the importance of this, that there is an opportunity in Australia, and Australia is opening its arms. I think there's also for us a role we have to play in Australia, which is about making sure there's cultural understanding of India, because India, as I said, is a very different place. Its regulations are different, its way of operating is different, its political system is different, its tastes are different, its wants, its needs. And so, from a cultural perspective, we call this India literacy and cultural understanding. And we need to make sure as a chamber that we're doing that as well. So, what we want to achieve, we want to make this happen.
Okay. And finally, what do you think Indian politics are like?
Very different to Australian politics. Because when I say to people, oh, I've retired from politics, they say in India, politicians never retire from politics.
Exactly.
So, politics is very different. In Australia, it's, we have no security around us. People can access us at any time. You can knock on the door of your MP's office and the MP will be there to greet you and work through the issues that you have. It's
so simple there.
It's simple and it's accessible. Politicians are accessible. And we have politicians there, like, to win my constituency, right? I had to knock on 30,000 doors and I had to greet a person at the door and I had to say, I am Jodi and I am standing for election. Can I come in, have a cup of tea, talk to me about what's important to you? Well, this is what I'm going to be able to give you. I walked around every street and I stood on street corners and I said, this is who I am. Come and, we call these mobile offices. So we put up our A-frame and we say, come and talk to us, and we advertise and people come. We have coffee with a poly, right? So you go to a cafe and you have coffee and you sit there and you talk about the issues important in the area. Our parliament is a very accessible place, so anyone can come in. Every religion is welcome, every person. It's a people's parliament. And yeah, politics is very different, very different. But I think, it's also about us in Australia respecting the way that politics is done here as well and understanding it. And that's part of what I think has been some of the difficulties. Is that India literacy. It's understanding the differences. But our role is to make sure people understand that. But, would I ever be a politician here in India? I'm not sure. I don't think I could cope with that. I don't think I could cope with that.
Fine. So you love Indian food, you love Indian dress. What about Indian cinema?
Oh yes, absolutely. So Netflix has become one of my favorite because Netflix actually has an incredible range of, Tollywood and Bollywood and,
different genres as well. Yeah.
Oh, amazing, right? So yeah, it's, I think, the lovely thing about Indian cinema is there's this kind of escapism thing as well, which I really appreciate. And my husband is big on historical, recounts. So India does that well as well. So yeah, we in Australia love that, and it's because of the huge Indian Australian community. You know, we're having people over there all the time. I think I'd love to see more, you know, movies shot in Australia, but it's a burgeoning, you know, sector here in India, and yeah, I love it. Yeah.
Any specific film you can name? Any Telugu one?
There's one in particular, but I always pronounce it wrong, and I watched it again the other night, which is Bahubali.
Bahubali.
Yeah, there we go. So I watched that again the other night, and it was really funny because I said to my husband, "Oh, you've got to watch this. You know, you have to watch it." So we put it on, and he thought it was a historical drama, and he's like, you know, when he comes out and he's shaking
It was a fiction.
his hair.
It was a fiction. Yeah.
He's shaking his hair and he's climbing up the cliff, and my husband's like, "This is not," and I just love it. I think it's fabulous. It's wonderful, and of course I've watched both. So.
It's so nice talking to you, Jodi.
Tisho, thank you for making me feel so welcome. And I would just say to all your viewers that, you know, consider Australia. Think about the potential in Australia.
For sure. As a national...
And we'd love to have you in Australia as well, not just your cousin.
Wow. Coming from you, I think
we would
that's
most
enough.
welcome you.
Sure. One day I'll definitely be in Australia to study all that you are doing. The great work you people are doing there.
I can show you my sari collection.
Oh yeah, I would love to see that. Interesting. Thank you so much for your time. You've been so generous, taking time off your busy schedule, and it's good to have you here.
Thank you
so
very
much.
Thank you.
All the best.